Hi, and welcome to today's episode. Today's episode, we'll be discussing the 1770s. So it all started off with the Boston Massacre. So the Boston Massacre was caused by angry colonists who wanted representation. So the colonists approached the British soldiers and started bombarding them with stuff like clubs, snowballs, and rocks. So then, a British soldier shot his gun and hit a colonist. So this led to a trial, and during this trial, John Adams was the one who represented the British soldiers to give them a fair trial. So John Adams did this to show that the British would still get their representation. So after the trial had cooled down, there was a whole nother part of this that pretty much looked really bad on the British side, which was Crispus Attucks, who was a freed slave and was the first death of the Boston Massacre. So the colonists used this casualty to steer some of the other colonists' emotions and get them to rebel with them. So a free black slave getting shot and killed by a British soldier was not a good look on the British side. So after that, it was the Boston Tea Party. So the Boston Tea Party was when 342 chests of tea was dumped into the Boston Harbor. Although tea was a shared interest between the colonists and British, the colonists were not hesitant to pour it all in the Boston Harbor. And the tea cost around $18,000, and this also led to the Coercive Acts. The whole Patrick Henry speech came out. So he said, "Give me liberty or give me death." And that was when he said, that's what he said to the Second Virginia Convention on March 23rd, 1775 at St. John's Church in Richmond, Virginia. So Henry is credited with having swung the balance in convincing the convention to pass a resolution delivering Virginia troops for the Revolutionary War. Among the delegates to the convention were future U.S. Presidents Thomas Jefferson and George Washington. So later on, we have the Battle of Bunker Hill. So the battle was actually fought on the wrong hill, and this was when the colonists realized they could defeat the British. And it wasn't a physical win, but it was more of a physical, mentally win. And this really boosted up the spirits of most colonists during the time.
2, 1. Give me liberty or give me death!
So shortly after that, the Common Sense was published. So Common Sense was written by a man named Thomas Paine, and he basically tried to let people know they need to use their minds and common sense in knowing right and wrong. And shortly after that, that's pretty much what led to the Declaration of Independence being adopted. So the United States Declaration of Independence is the pronouncement adopted by the Second Continental Congress, meeting at the Pennsylvania State House in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on July 4th, 1776. So the Declaration explained why the 13 colonies at war with the Kingdom of Great Britain regarded themselves as 13 independent states, no longer under British rule. So with the Declaration, these new states took a collective first step toward forming the United States of America. The Declaration was signed by representations from New Hampshire, Massachusetts Bay, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. And that's how we got our Declaration of Independence.
Silence down, the trial is starting. So, the trial of Captain Preston. So, before the trial began, a propaganda war of sorts took place. So, the Governor Hutchinson sent a report to London criticizing Boston for its violence and mob actions against the British soldiers. He later wrote, "Government is at an end and in the hands of the people." Sam Adams and the Sons of Liberty took this testimony of witnesses of their own document, which they titled "A Short Narrative of the Horrid Massacre in Boston." But the most effective propaganda piece was Paul Revere's widely printed cartoon, "The Bloody Massacre." The court appointed Sam Quincy Adams, a strong Tory, the British sympathizer, as special prosecutor. So Sam Adams persuaded the town of Boston to pay for a second prosecutor, the patriot Robert Treat Paine. So Captain Preston could not get any more to defend him in court until a Tory merchant prosecutor lawyer John Adams to do so. Although he was not one of the patriot leaders in Boston, the 35-year-old Adams believed that it was vital that the British British soldiers and the captain receive fair trials. So Adams believed that the cause for self-government could not be damaged if Boston justice turned out to be little more than lynch law. Joining Adams and the defense team was a Tory judge, Robert, and a young, fiery patriot lawyer, Josiah Quincy, the younger brother of the special prosecutor. So this continued on with mob activities and threats of lynching. Captain Preston's trial began in October 24, 1770. It lasted 6 days, an extremely long time then for a criminal trial. The court also took the unusual step of suffocating the jury, which was keeping jury members away from their family and friends. So for judges, wearing red robes that signified a death penalty case presented at Captain Preston's trial. The key question was whether he actually gave an order to his men to fire the mob, or if he didn't. And Preston denied giving the order, but did not testify. So some witnesses said he gave such a command. Most said he did not. Much of the testimony centered on who was shouting the word "fire" when the shooting began. In the end, the Boston jury found Captain Preston not guilty. To Sam Adams and the other Sons of Liberty, Captain Preston was shooting at the crowd himself, but the strong feeling in the town remained that someone would have to pay for the 5 men who had died. So for the trial of the British soldiers, this was a whole different time. So the trial of the 8 British soldiers began on November 27th with a different jury. but before the same four judges, as in the Preston case. So Samuel Quincy Adams and Robert Treat Payne continued to prosecute. Sampson Blowers joined John Adams and his former Harvard classmate Josiah Quincy for the defense. This trial lasted 7 days with more than 80 witnesses testifying. The prosecutors only had to prove that one of the soldiers fired with their gun and the intent to kill. All the soldiers would then be equally guilty of murder and would be hung. So the prosecution tried to show that after months of abuse from the townspeople, all the soldiers have had their revenge in their hearts. But in particular, a witness testified that 1 of 2 weeks before the shooting, Kilroy had said that he would never miss an opportunity if he had one to fire one of the inhabitants, and that he had wanted to have an opportunity ever since he landed. After Montgomery fired the first shot, the prosecution argued Kilroy had his opportunity and shot rope maker Samuel Gray to death. The defense team had to overcome some major problem. If Captain Preston did not order his men to fire as Preston's jury had ruled, then why did the men fire? Adams and the other defense lawyer had to show that the crowd was endangering the soldiers, and they would have to pursue a jury that probably held strong anti-British feelings.
Order in the court, order in the court. The trial is about to start. Please, everyone, quiet down and pay attention. Thank you. Order in the court, order in the court. The jury has spoken, and we think that he is guilty, and they all need to be punished, all 8 of them. Thank you.
By a man named Thomas Paine, and he basically tried to let people know that they need to use their minds and common sense and knowing what's right and wrong. With Paul Revere. Paul Revere never completed the journey. On the evening of 18 April 1775, Paul Revere was instructed to ride to Lexington, Massachusetts, to warn Samuel Adams and John Hancock the British troops were marching to arrest him, and then rode on to Concord.
The Intolerable Acts, also known as the Coercive Act. The Intolerable Acts were punitive laws passed by British Parliament in 1774 after the Boston Tea Party. The laws were meant to punish the
Declare the Intolerable Acts.
Boo!
No! Boo! Go!
Forge functioned as the third of 8 military encampments for the Continental Army's main body. Commanded by George Washington in September 1777, British forces had captured the American capital of Philadelphia. After failing to retake the city, Washington led his 12,000-man army into winter quarters at Valley Forge, located approximately 18 miles northwest of Philadelphia. They remained there for 6 months from December 19th, 1777 to June 19th, 1778. At Valley Forge, the Continentals struggled to manage a disastrous supply crisis while retaining and reorganizing their units. About 1,700 to 2,000 soldiers died from the disease, possibly exacerbated by malnutrition. That's it.
So later on, we also have the story of Washington crossing the Delaware. So George Washington crosses the Delaware River, which occurred on the night of December 25th through the 26th of 1776. during the American Revolutionary War. So that was the first move in a surprise attack organized by George Washington against the German mercenaries in service of the British and forces in Trenton, New Jersey on the morning of December 26th. And that's what led up to the Valley Forge winter. So this all led to the French and the U.S. forming an alliance. So the treaty was a defensive alliance between France and the United States of America, and it was formed in the midst of the American Revolutionary War, which promised mutual military support in case fighting was broke out between French and the British forces. And as a result of signing the previous document, this concluded the Treaty of Amity and Commerce. So Crispus Attucks is a freed slave, who was on his own, but had died later on due to the British, and it did not look good on the British side at all. So this started more chaoticness in the Revolutionary War.
Okay, here we go. Ready?
I've been recording for the last 8 seconds.
The United States Declaration of Independence is the pronouncement adopted by the Second Continental Congress, meeting at the Pennsylvania State House in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on July 4th, 1776. The Declaration explained why the 13 colonies at war with the Kingdom of Great Britain regarded themselves as 13 independent sovereign states, no longer under British rule. With these declarations, these new... We just gonna act like that didn't happen at the end.
Took a collective first step toward forming the United States of America. The Declaration was signed by representatives from New Hampshire, Massachusetts Bay, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia.
Independence! It's done.
Can I read it like this?
Yes.
Alright, where were you at?
Crispus.
The Intolerable Acts, also known as the Coercive Act. The Intolerable Acts were punitive laws passed by British Parliament in 1774 after the Boston Tea Party. The laws were meant to punish the The Forge functioned as the third of 8 military encampments for the Continental Congress. Start over.
Oh my god. France and the U.S. form an alliance. Oh, hold on. I read the title. Alright, ready?
Still recording.
The Boston Massacre has a scene of soldiers throwing things and then hear a gunshot. Then, due to the trail, and show how... Stop it. Hill. The battle was actually fought on the wrong hill, and this was when the colonists realized they could defeat the British. It wasn't a physical win, it was a psychological win.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And that concludes today's episode on the 1770s.
The Forge functioned as the third of 8 military encampments for the Continental Congress. Start over.
Oh my god. France and the U.S. form an alliance. Oh, hold on. I read the title. Alright, ready?
Still recording.
Oh yeah, this is his contact.